I am such a people person that it's all about the people for me. And then the rest of it is making sure that people around the table with me are a lot smarter than I am. And that's really how I approach investing.
Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Jon Staenberg. Jon has been an active venture capitalist for over 30 years, serving as a general partner in 3 funds, managing over $250 million. As an angel investor, Jon has made over 250 investments. Currently, he is focused on building Agate Hound Fund, a fund for search funds. This asset class is relatively unknown, but has shown exceptional performance over the past 40 years. Additionally, he spends his spare time working on his vineyard in Argentina, Hand of God Wines. Welcome, Jon. Good to see you.
Amazing to see you.
I know we were like kind of yakking about this before we started recording, but I have to say, this is selfishly like the best part of doing this podcast is I get to see people mostly that I know, but some that I don't know. And in your case, we've known each other for a very long time, but I very seldom get one-on-one time with you. So this is great.
Yeah, I feel, however, I'm not going to get the questions I have for you, but that's fine.
You can ask as long as they're not like private or weird or too vulnerable. I'm just kidding. You can ask me anything.
All right. Well, we'll see how it goes.
Oh yeah, you can
start.
ask me anything. Okay, I'm hitting you with rapid fire.
Rapid fire.
Mr. Hand of God Wines, which I have to say, incredible wine. Which wine is your favorite wine?
Of mine or in the world?
In the world. You're a
Well,
wine guy. So aside from yours.
The standard answer is the wine I'm drinking right now.
I'm sure this is not like the first person who's asked you this question, I'm guessing. No, but really, like,
No,
I
but
don't know a
really,
lot about wine. Like, what regions are the best? Obviously, you love Argentina, but like, where else? And are you red or white?
Yeah. So no and no. I love wine. I love the culture of wine. I love the people in the wine industry. And I'm not a golfer, but vineyards are a close substitute for beautiful places. I've never seen an ugly vineyard, right?
This is true.
Right. So, and I plan trips around biking and hiking through vineyards and wine tasting. It's so
I
fun.
love it. Can you please invite me? I want to go.
You're invited.
I love it. I'm in. I'm totally
All right.
in. What is the best concert that you've ever attended?
The first concert I ever attended, Bruce Springsteen, when I was 16 years old, the week that he was on the cover of both Time and Newsweek, if people still remember those magazines, in Omaha, Nebraska. And my parents
Wow.
took me because they said, "Oh, here, this guy's coming to Omaha. We should go see him." And it changed my life.
The boss. I
The
love it.
boss, 4.5 hours. Like, who does that? Amazing.
Yeah.
He
Those are
does.
good parents.
Yeah.
Your parents sat through it. I love that. So I know you've been an angel investor, venture capitalist. Now you're doing search funds, which I'm excited to learn more about and get into. But I guess, what are 3 qualities that would describe you as an investor?
Curious, curious, and curious. I know that's not really the 3 you're looking for, but curious. And also, I am such a people person that it's all about the people for me. And then the rest of it is making sure that people around the table with me are a lot smarter than I am. And
Yeah,
that's really how I approach investing.
that's super smart. But how do you assess what kind of smart are you talking about?
Well, it depends on the situation and what we need and what gaps need to be filled in, right? When I was doing venture, very often I'm not a technical person. So I knew I needed that help. And so that would be one thing. But there's so many different kinds of smart, Shauna, as you know, that I just want to make sure that those areas are covered in the whole deal. And that's one of the reasons I love search funds, which we'll talk about later, because it's completely different in an approach around the people that I love it so much.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to hear about it. I'm super curious also. So are you still doing this ticket stub thing? Can you tell me for half a second? I had to throw it in there because I'm curious what's the ticket stub that you're most like your most coveted ticket stub?
So ticket stubs are a little different than an original piece of art, for example, because ticket stubs, some of the value is in the collections. So, for example, if you had every Super Bowl ticket stub ever, that's a very valuable collection. If you had every World Series ticket stub ever, that's incredibly valuable.
So
So
what do you have?
I have, for example, every home run that game from every home run that Mark McGwire hit when he hit 70 home runs, and the same for Barry Bonds when he hit 73 home runs. As an example, I have some 50,000. It's all sports ticket stubs, and I love ticket stubs, and I'll tell you why. And by the way, sports are a big part of my life and one of my passions. And it also has to do with the name of my fund in search funds, which we'll
Oh,
talk about. But anyway, I love sports ticket stubs because, of course, they're being replaced, as we all know. And they are an original form of art in their own way. And they mark a moment, they mark a drama, they mark bringing people together. And I don't think there's
yeah.
anything else quite like that.
So
And
where do you keep these ticket stubs and how much could you sell them for? And are you selling them?
Well, no, I've never sold one. I've bought a lot. And I don't honestly know the answer to that question. My daughter was like, Dad, when you're gone, what are you going to do with those ticket stubs? How much are they worth? Right?
Are they worth? I mean, do you
Yeah,
know
I
the
assume
answer?
they're worth tens of thousands, if not more. And they're in
Wow.
a storage locker, which of course, probably just my monthly payment for all these years, probably is
Yeah,
net
it's a
zero.
wash.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah, it's like a
wash.
wash. That's so funny. And so do you attend all of these or you just buy
No,
the
no,
ticket
no, no,
stubs?
no, no, no. Because of course I didn't attend every game that Mark McGuire hit his home
Oh
run, but
yeah, because yeah,
right. But I have people out there who collect these for me, and I'll just get random mailings from people with like
that's
a
so cool.
stack of ticket stubs. And I have people who I'm in their will. If they pass away before me, I get all their ticket stubs. And
That's so cool. That's awesome. I know you're a world traveler. What's one of your favorite places that you've visited?
well, I'm kind of passionate over the top right now about Portugal, and don't say everyone else is too. I've been doing it for a while. I'm working on my golden visa. It's funny. When I was 12, Shauna, my mother put me on a train with my friend Kevin Sketter from Omaha, Nebraska, two of us, no adults, 12 years old, to take a train to New York City. And I think that's what set the seed of an idea that I'm a traveler and the world's amazing. We should just go see it. So every year, first of all, I visit a different place, a new country. I've been to over 100 countries. And it is my jam. It is my heroin. It's my crack. I love it beyond anything I can imagine. And I feel such urgency. I got to go see all these incredible places.
What's on your list?
First of all, I have a teenage daughter, and there's so many places I want to go with her that I haven't been. The Galapagos, safaris in Africa, right? There's so many cool places. Um, yeah, there's plenty of places to go that feel super safe or super interesting. And actually, if I was completely retired and I had all the money in the world, some people want to get their second home here and they're playing. What I want to do is get one of those condos on the luxury cruise liner and just travel the world going around.
I 100% am on the same page. And I feel like, well, first of all, I'm nowhere near retiring, but I feel like that question starts to come on the back half. And people are like,
Right,
so what next? And I'm like, first of all, I love what I do and I'm young and like, why
right.
would I quit? But if I
Same.
was crazy rich, I do not want a second home that I'm like kind of strapped down to. The opposite. I want to travel the world, everywhere in the world.
I'm the
Yeah.
same way. And then when I was in college, my parents were kind enough to let me go on semester at sea, where you literally go around the world, which is a
I
crazy
love that.
concept, right?
I love
And
that. Yeah.
again, it just once again just lit the fire. It
Yeah.
fueled me. Yeah.
So I feel like you are famous, but if you could be famous for something, you really, I'm telling you, you're everywhere and you like know everybody and you're the ultimate connector. And But if you were famous for like being, you said sports are important, famous athlete, famous artist, famous rock star, what would you be famous for?
God, I really wish it was doing good in the world. Honestly, I mean, it'd be great if I was a great artist. I think Banksy, whoever Banksy is, I love that he touches people's lives in the way he, she, whoever it is, does. And it brings, I mean, it's amazing how many times I see a Banksy and think how relevant it is today, what the messaging is, how it makes me smile, how it makes me think, it provokes. If I could do something like that, to me, that would be the ultimate.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. And what is your, this is like a want, but what's your biggest pet peeve?
Intolerance. Intolerance. People who hold on to negativity, people who make judgments about people, people who can't let go of past hurts. It's, the world is so divided right now. We're not listening to each other. We're putting up walls. That's it.
Thank you for saying that. I love it. Okay. If there was a book written about your life, what would it be called?
Really?
It would just be called Really?
Yeah. That's how
funny.
how every chapter would end. It would tell the story and then we go, really?
That's so funny. Lots of question marks.
Yeah, lots of
So
questions.
you tell me, I mean, if I hadn't known, I mean, I don't think, and I've known you for over 10 years, and I don't think I ever knew that you were from Nebraska. Like,
until
I researched you for this,
Yeah.
I did my little homework assignment. Like, tell me more about that childhood and your parents, and like, how did they end up in Nebraska?
Mayberry RFD. You know, I grew up in as middle class as could be. Walked literally. I know it sounds so cliche, but I walked in the snow a mile to school. And it was great. And my parents would say, you know, dinner's at 6 and come back when you're done playing in the neighborhood. And we left the keys in the car in the ignition and the doors were open and it was fantastic. I mean, honestly,
how things have changed. I know.
Oh my gosh. But I feel super connected to Omaha. For me, besides just having a great childhood, is I think one of my joys in life is under the radar discovery. And Omaha is unbelievably sophisticated. People are, it's actually very interesting. There's great art galleries there. There's a really cool downtown. The people are really sophisticated. There's more than meets the eye. And
interesting.
And if you haven't been, by the way, I'll
haven't
be there.
been.
Oh my gosh, let's go. Here, I'm making this offer right now.
We're going so many places already. This is great.
We're going to the Berkshire meeting in next May because Charlie Munger will be 100. And let's hope he's still there. And if you haven't been, it's an unbelievably inspiring weekend. So back to Omaha, and Omaha is a place I go back to and feel at home. And I still have family there. And, you know, it was growing up, it was easy and simple and people were kind. And my life was pretty straightforward. I was a tennis player and it's literally my mom would drop me off with 10 other kids at the tennis courts and we'd spend the whole day there. And it was our posse. And my dad had some garden apartments. They were actually, now garden apartments are everywhere, but they were kind of a new thing back then. And I was picking weeds at 8 years old and earning my $1 an hour. And I had my first job in the bookstore in the middle of the mall at Crossroads, you know, which is a block away. And
what did you want to be when you were little? Did you have a sense of like, when I'm big, I'm going to be XYZ?
Well, of course, when I was 9, so I grew up being really short. And it wasn't until 8th grade that I grew like 9 inches. You know, I was going to say I was really fast. And we had this game, Killed a Man with a Football. And I was like, sure, I was going to be the next Gale Sayers. Your audience won't know who the Gale Sayers is. But no, my parents were pretty entrepreneurial. No, they were very entrepreneurial. And I had no idea what I was going to be, but I knew it was going to be something that I was going to create. Somehow.
Yeah. And I'm guessing you were probably pretty studious, Stanford. Like, and how did you decide who was guiding you through those types of decisions? Like back then, it was so different.
Okay, you want the single probably biggest moment in my academic advancement was in third
Sure.
grade. Third grade. And it's
Okay.
when, so in kindergarten in Omaha, there were 4 levels of class for any grade, kind of the not so smart and the smart. And that was all determined by a test they gave us in kindergarten where you had to draw a human. And I can't draw to save my life. So I was put in the low class and I was completely bored and I was acting out and I was a class clown. And finally, my mother went to the school and said, put him in the first class. This is crazy. And that changed everything. And then I competed.
Wow.
But I
That's
mean,
awesome.
that's a pretty amazing that she saw it and did something about it.
Yes, absolutely. And you talked about this posse at the tennis club playing tennis.
Not
And sounds
tennis
like you
club.
had
Let's be clear, honey. We didn't.
okay.
No club. It was the public courts.
Okay, your posse at the public courts. Are you still in touch with these people? And
Oh yeah,
would they say like this is the same Jon from like fifth grade?
absolutely, absolutely.
What has changed as far as like not saying like have you changed with money and success, but more like what has changed as far as your interests or your drive, your values, like anything changed since then? Or are you like kind of like this is who I am and how I've always been?
Well, I hope I'm a little bit wiser and a little bit more mature and a little more thoughtful and a little less selfish and before the word growth mindset was coined, I think I've just always had that. And I don't care if I'm 60, 80, whatever age, I hope I'm still learning and I hope I'm still growing and I hope I'm still being a better person. Because that in the end, for my mom instilled that in us, and that's as core as it gets for me. So
Yeah.
I think they would say I'm pretty much the same guy.
Yeah. And
But
who's the us? You have siblings?
yeah, so I'm the youngest of 4. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, and
the baby.
I have a brother in St. Louis who's been quite successful monetarily, and I have a sister who's an occupational therapist in Omaha who was very successful in her career, and I have a really warm, big-hearted brother in Lincoln, Nebraska, and
Love that.
we're all quite different though.
And who influenced you as a kid? Was it obviously all your siblings, your parents? Did you have any mentors or teachers that saw something in you?
Okay, another mother story. My mother, uh, she was not afraid to do things outside the box. And I think I get a lot of it from her. My dad passed away when I was pretty young. And so she had to take on a lot with 4 kids. But I remember in 4th grade, she went to my homeroom teacher and said, we're traveling. Would it be okay if Jon lived at your house for a week? Like, who does that?
Did the
And
teacher say yes?
yeah, oh yeah. And then I did it in 5th grade. I did it in 6th grade. And of course, people hate the other students were like, who is this guy? He's like the teacher's pet, staying at their houses.
That's so funny. Well, she had to get it done. She had to get it handled. Well, she did something right. And then you went to Stanford. Were you just like really studious? Like who told you about Stanford versus some other school closer?
Well, I'm a little bit over the top when it comes to probably doing too much. And so I was one of those kids that before the Common App, right, you can now apply to a bunch of schools. Back then, you actually had to handwrite or type, and the questions were different. I applied to 13 different schools, which was insane. I don't know why I did that. Honestly, I remember getting the Yale's Insider Guide to Colleges, and I was like, oh, that one looks good, and that one looks pretty good. And that
You were having FOMO just the same way as you go to like 6 events a night. You're like, well, I didn't want to miss out. I mean, what if I like Stanford? What if I like
right,
Yale?
absolutely. And Stanford wasn't Stanford then. It wasn't the name that it is. It didn't have the same cachet. Of course, it was a good school, but it didn't. I didn't think, oh, I got in, amazing, right? I was happy. It's like great, but
Yeah.
I really wanted to get away from Omaha, but not because I wanted to get away from Omaha, because I wanted to get away and see the rest of the United States or see a different part, just like the travel thing, right? And so
Yeah.
it was either going to be East Coast or West Coast. It didn't really matter that much to me. And so talk about how life sends you in directions. I was only one of two white people who selected, signed up for the Black theme house at Stanford as a freshman. And I didn't do it for any special reason other than I thought I only had a few Black people in my high school class of 800. That'll be interesting. And I mean, nobody asked to do this. Actually, ironically, one other person asked, and they were white and they were from Nebraska, and we did not know each other, which is maybe says something about Nebraska. But that selection changed my life, and it ultimately led to me being at Microsoft.
So tell me more about that. What was the house exactly?
Well, so they had theme houses. They had the Hispanic theme house and the Asian theme house and different theme
Do
houses,
they
right?
still have that?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
called Ujima.
Interesting.
In fact, I was just back from my reunion less than 3 weeks ago, and I had dinner with a bunch of friends from Ujima. We all get together and still talk and see each other, and it was fantastic. But it was like a completely different country from based on my
It's
experience.
men and women in this
Yeah,
house?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so how many
50%,
people
50% Black.
people are in it?
I think there were 100 total.
100 people, 50% Black, 50% anything
White.
else, or
Yeah,
white? Okay.
but mostly white. No, but everything else. Yeah, rest of world.
Wow.
Yeah, and it
Yeah,
was
you were trying to like open up your world to meet
yeah.
different people.
So I don't know why that is that I do that, but I'm not. But that's the traveler in me, right?
Yeah.
And I just thought
Well,
I'm
that's
going to
the
college,
humanist in you. Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Right.
How did
And
you decide to study econ and Asian studies? Were you planning on?
honestly, here we go again with. I probably had 7 majors before I decided on econ, and I ultimately decided on econ. And I'll tell you, this is bearing the truth. All the other majors were too damn hard, and so I'm
Yeah.
like, wait, there's a bunch of jocks in econ, and I know that I can still do well in this and still party with my friends because most of my friends were like pre-med, and if I had done that, I would never have been I would never have had the social side. That would have been pre-med was like having a sport.
Yeah,
You know,
all consuming.
oh my, all consuming, right? And so I figured out that I could do econ and be with them.
How did you decide also Asian studies? Like what were you
Oh,
what
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, gosh, you're asking good questions. But when I was 13, someone gave me a book that actually had a profound impact on me. And I don't know if everybody will remember this book, but it was called Journey to Ixtlan. You know that book? Carlos
I do
Castaneda.
not.
Carlos Castaneda, the Yaqui Way, Yaqui being an Indian tribe, Mexican Indian tribe, as I remember. Anyway, it was about, it's going to sound bad, but it was about shamanistic activities, which included a lot of peyote. And I thought, this is so interesting. What a different view of the world this is. And as I started going down the path of learning about different cultures and different shamanistic rituals, I got very into Buddhism. And Buddhism took me to Asian studies. Yes, I was very interested
Oh,
in China and interested in all things around Asia, but that was my gateway from a book at age 13.
wow. Fascinating. So it's interesting. So you're studying econ, Asian studies, and is anybody kind of saying, were you working through college or like what were you thinking
I
is
always had a job. That was the thing. I always had to have a job. And so my job was to be an RA. I just figured out that was the best way to have a double and get paid and fulfill my requirement to my own parents to have a job. Because Stanford was super expensive and they were
oh
super
yeah.
generous. And we didn't have a lot of scholarship money. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to work for sure.
So you kept this RA job, but some of these, I guess, investment banks and management consulting firms back in those days were the ones that like kind of went on campus and did recruiting. What was your game plan and what was, I'm researching you and I'm thinking, okay, so he starts in tech, then he gets into venture, now he's got a vineyard. Like you're kind of touching a lot of different things. And as a parent, I'm sure that you talked to your daughter about this. None of us knew what the hell, at least I didn't know what the hell I was going
No
to do.
way.
Unless you're
No
like
way.
thinking I'm going to be a doctor and I'm going to medical school.
Right.
You just kind of like, it's this like, especially with our personalities, it's just people that you meet. So what led to your first job out of school and what was it?
First of all, I got into business school from undergrad, and they were kind enough to say, you can come now or come in 2 years. And they generally said 2 years is better because then you have some experience to play off of for the context of the classes, right? And so once again, I did what I always seem to do, which is, where else haven't I lived? So my first job, real job, well, my first job was a volunteer, like a Peace Corps volunteer in Asia. So I lived in Taiwan. But when I got a more normal, quote unquote, job, I came back and I said, I've never been in Dallas. I guess I'll just find a job in Dallas. And so I found a job in Dallas and lived in Dallas for a year, which was different and interesting. But then, as I said, they allowed me to come back to business school. And I remember going to the library back then and getting every entrepreneur magazine, Fortune, Forbes, Inc., Entrepreneur, and ripping out pages of interesting people. Like I did this. I had files that were this thick of like, that person seems, that is so interesting. And so that's really how I was forming my ideas. And over time, because I was in Palo Alto and because I'm looking at entrepreneurs, I'm learning about venture capital. And my father was a real estate guy, and I love real estate, and I still love real estate. And Joel, we talked about earlier, our mutual friend, still invest in real estate. But I was learning about venture capital. And so I thought, that's really what I want to do. And then my other white friend from Ujamaa said, why don't you come to Seattle, where he was working, and we'll interview you and see if you like it. And if you do, there's a little software company named Microsoft, and we'll hire you. And I thought, it's a free trip to Seattle. I've never been to Seattle, another following my theme of going new places, and had the most intense, wonderful, smart interviews I'd ever experienced in my life. And they were hard cases, and I liked digging in with them and kind of arguing about it and trying to figure things out. And I thought, what's the worst that can happen? I'll do this job, and if it doesn't work out. And I always view life. That's a major mode of thinking for me. What's the worst that can happen? Right? I feel very comfortable. I'm going to land somewhere. And if you take that view, then everything's open to you. Right?
100%. That's so powerful. I love that.
And so I went to Microsoft, and within my first couple weeks, I went to a venture capitalist in Seattle, Woody House, and there weren't that many venture capitalists back then. And I said, Woody, I think what I really want to do is venture. And he said, I want you to work somewhere for 3 to 5 years where you have to actually implement things, see that they work, hire and fire, and then go and do venture, because you'll be
make
so
you a
much
much better investor. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was kind of the path. And after right around 5 years, I went back to Woody and said, okay, I took your advice. I'm going to go figure this thing out and do venture.
So timeline wise, not that we need to get too into this, but I'm just like now personally curious. So you did Microsoft and then Stanford MBA?
No, the
other way around. You flipped it. Okay, so then you did the Microsoft, but a lot of people just, they get those golden handcuffs at Microsoft. And I mean, I meet with people as a recruiter all the time who are,
Right.
20 years in, whatever it is, and they kind of can't leave. And there is that little window. Did you just knew, like, this was my game plan. I'm going to go back to Woody.
Yeah, I'm not a good big company person. I don't really love the rules. I don't really love a lot of structure.
Yeah.
I knew that.
Interesting.
I knew that.
How would you describe that culture? You didn't have a ton to compare it to, but obviously you've been in this ecosystem in Seattle. Tenacious culture.
Smart, competitive. They hired for that. That's what they, I knew nothing about tech. I knew nothing about marketing, really.
Mm-hmm. But is that what you did there, marketing?
Yeah. Yeah. We created the corporate marketing group. We created a lot of things that they needed the infrastructure for this. it was very collegial. You felt like it was almost a fraternity. Of course, there were some women, not that many, to be honest, but there were some. But it was like hardcore. We're all on the same page. We're going after Word Perfect. We're going after Lotus 1-2-3. We're going after
Oh my
Novell.
God, remember Word Perfect and
Yeah,
Lotus?
yeah,
Wow.
of course,
Old
of
school,
course.
old school. Interesting. And so if you had to, I'm guessing that you're the kind of person who doesn't look back and say coulda, shoulda, woulda, or, you
No.
know, I'm more just curious though, if you had to go back and talk to your younger self, undergrad at Stanford, is there anything that you would have done differently or that you wish somebody had told you about those first, few years, jobs? Would you get an MBA again?
Yeah, I think getting an MBA, if you go to a good school, and I do think it matters, to be honest, because I just had my reunion for business school as well. It just happened to coincide that they both were this year. It's the people. I'm still inspired by my classmates, and we're still close. And that we did this thing called glimpses, where eight different people gave a 10-minute talk, and extraordinary journeys and extraordinary people. And people felt like this was the best one yet. And so, one of my core themes in life is there's two types of people: those that give you energy and those that suck energy.
Like
And
Celestine Prophecy. Did you read that book?
I did, yes.
I love that
So
book.
yeah, and so I just get so much energy out of the people I met in business school, and I'm inspired. I still am inspired.
So tell me about your early days as a venture capitalist. I know that you've invested in over 400 companies, lots of, I'm reading this, I'm like Seagate, Spinner, LiveBid, InfoSpace, Cafe
Yeah,
Press,
there's lots.
Splunk,
Yeah,
Avalara, DocuSign,
yeah,
crazy, Facebook.
yeah.
What lens do you look at, and what was your very first investment that you made?
Well, so there wasn't a venture firm up here that was going to hire me. So I started by basically finding deals and then uh, pitching them to individual investors and doing one-offs. And they were just local deals. And honestly, I'm not sure I remember the very first one we did. That's a great question. I'd have to go back and
What
look.
was the first win? I guess you might remember that one. The first one that
Yeah,
you were like,
well, the
oh,
first real win was Spinner, which was sold to AOL. That was a really good outcome, and I'm still in touch with the founders. And it was such a great concept because they literally had a bunch of turntables and they were broadcasting them on the web. It was, they,
yeah,
it was so old school. It's
old
just
school.
great.
Yeah, so old school.
But I started by doing these one-offs. And after a while, people said, okay, stop coming here. We get what you're doing. Why don't you aggregate, put a fund together, and then we'll invest. And I did a little fund, and then I did a little fund two, and then I was part of a bigger fund for fund three. And it was amazing. I mean, but it's so different than it is today back then because there just weren't that many people doing it.
Yeah.
And everybody knew everybody. And Sand Hill Road was the place. And my I always think about how can I differentiate myself in the ecosystem, right? I'm never going to be smarter than everyone else. I'll work as hard as anyone else. But how do I create a way to be adding value uniquely? And so my pitch back then was pretty straightforward. Microsoft mattered to Sand Hill Road and to Silicon Valley in a way that is different than it is today. And so I would say I'm going to be your source of always either helping you partner or getting competitive information or figuring out that relationship. And I could do that uniquely because I was there for 5 years. And so I would get into deals because I would say that. And I wasn't very big, so I wasn't taking too much of the deal. So people let me into some really interesting deals. But I had to figure out what my positioning was, if that
What your
makes sense.
position is going to be. And so when you are investing, whether it's like through the fund or just as an angel investor, are you more like looking at a bunch of data, or are you more gut or team or total addressable market? Like what criterion are you looking at when you're looking at a deal?
Yeah, I think I get this question comes up almost every time. And I think in the beginning I was more about the data, and today I'm probably more about the gut and the feel and the people and who else is around the table. And as you know, Shauna, very rarely, less than 1% of the time, do these deals ever go from point A to point B as is presented in the business plan. So you got to have people that can rally the troops around any kind of pivot there might be, and people who can, of course, see the pivot and appropriately do the pivot, whatever that looks like, right?
So then what
And
attributes would those be? If you said there's 3 attributes that are like absolutes in an entrepreneur.
well, I think sales is always undervalued. You're always selling, right? You're always selling, whether you're selling to your own team, whether you're selling an idea internally, whether you're selling to get a new hire, whether you're selling to customers. So I think that I want to know that people can do that and do it effectively. So I want people, besides being able to sell, I want people to really, and I think Jeff Bezos probably really instilled the idea better than anyone. Customer obsession, really understanding product market fit, really understanding how to delight. Like, what is it that you're doing that is going to create such value and delight for the customer? And how much of an obsession do you have with that? Because if someone comes in and says, oh, the market's really big and the market needs this, I just want to know how they know it. There's very few people, there's just almost nobody besides a Steve Jobs that could see around the corner. So it's important for me to kind of get in the head of someone to really understand where the idea is coming from and how is it being tested in their own mind and what's the rigor behind that. So I think those 2 things are really important.
That totally makes sense. What about experience? Like, have they done this before?
Well, we are going to talk about search funds, and I don't value experience as much. Certainly the record of second time entrepreneurs, I think, outperforms. But there's plenty of really smart people in the world that can pull this off. And I bias towards that because I get excited about working with them even more. But sure, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that if someone's been successful once and they come in with an interesting idea, they get points for that in my evaluation, of course.
Yeah. Well, that's just, very, very
that's just
smart.
natural.
It makes sense.
Right.
That's just natural. Yeah. Is there a story of a startup that you've invested in or that you didn't invest in? I think I know one that you didn't invest in that you've told me about, but is there, let's just talk about the ones that you did. Is there a story about a startup that you've invested in that's been particularly either memorable or impactful?
Oh gosh. I mean, it's funny. I feel like I once said to a mentor of mine, how do you know at the beginning what's going to be successful? And, the line that I always say is, a venture capitalist's favorite deal is the last deal they did. And it's because everyone loves the new, they're excited about it. And it's amazing how many times I've been surprised both ways, like a deal that I thought was certainly going to work. But one of my favorite deals is a very quiet deal locally. And it's a guy that most people don't know, but he has for 30 years just been an incredibly successful operator who runs cable companies.
Oh.
And most people don't even know about him. And he's a good guy. He's smart. He knows how to run teams. He's been incredibly successful. And it's so fun to see him execute. Steady, steady, steady. And he sees it in a way others don't. And that's been fun to be part of his journey. And I'm grateful for having been part of that. So that's one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah. And how do you feel like the scene? I know you mentioned that things are different now.
Yeah.
How has the tech scene evolved over the years since you landed in the scene?
Different. I mean, everybody's a venture capitalist today, right? It's kind of crazy. And I literally remember trying to explain to my mother, hey, I'm going to go do this thing called venture capital. And I'm not sure she ever really got it. Uh, and when I went out to sell it, people didn't even know what venture capital meant, right?
Yeah.
Now, of course,
Same with
everybody
recruiting.
knows.
I've been in recruiting. Next year's 30 years. And people are like, recruiting, like for the army? I'm like, no, recruiting for companies, or just like a headhunter. People are like, what's that? And now everyone's a recruiter. Everyone's a
And
headhunter,
everyone's a recruiter, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what's happened, what I've come to realize is with venture, it's often a misalignment of interests. And I'll give
Mm.
you one small example of that. I've done a fair amount of angel investing. As an angel investor, you take the most risk. And yet, once it goes institutional, they don't care about you.
Yeah, you get
Right.
diluted and you're out.
You get
Yeah.
diluted or crammed down or pushed out, or and yet you took all the risk. That's not an alignment of interest. Okay. Or what about the case in venture when a company has raised a bunch of money and the company has been run into the ground? They've lost all the money. Everyone has been fired except the founder or CEO, who they say will pay you a couple $1,000,000 if you just stay on to see this thing to its final exit. Wait, what? That doesn't seem like alignment of interest. So I'm always feeling like I don't know that venture is the best risk reward outcome that I can do. And because it's gotten noisier, and because there's more investors, and because it's gotten faster and everything is, hey, take it now or see you later, I just don't like playing in the sandbox as much as I
It
used to.
totally makes sense. I was going to ask you because, I've had a lot of exposure in different ways to venture, and a lot of friends are in venture and like incredible human beings. But just like anything, in recruiting, there can be reputations of like, ugh, a recruiter, same type of thing
Right,
with
of
venture,
course.
like, oh, they're the guy that's going to blah, blah, blah. Like, and it so does not align with who you are, who I am, like your personal values.
Right.
And at this stage, well, first of all, you got into search funds, which is super freaking cool. But also, you have a position of life of like, you know what? I want to really love and be passionate about what I'm doing and feel good about it. And so that's great that you, have stayed curious and stayed engaged and connected to yourself enough to know, like, I'm going toward this now.
Yeah, I would say it is extremely important for me to be doing things that more align with my values, and and also to add value and to really feel
Mm-hmm.
like what we talked about earlier is where can I complement the rest of the people around the table. And I just wasn't feeling that I was very good at that anymore for a variety of reasons, including when I started doing venture capital, it was a serial rollout of new technologies. Today, it's a tidal wave of new technologies. There's 25 new technologies. I just simply, I'm not smart enough to do it. And I can't keep up, and I'm not going to have the same energy. I'm not going to have the same learning. And on the other side, the founders aren't very interested in hearing what I have to say. Honestly, it's a different mindset. There's a certain arrogance almost. And
Mm,
so
that's
I
too
said,
bad. That's interesting.
it's really interesting. I know so many people who 55 to 65 who are so smart, who they're not being asked for their opinion. It's as if their
That's
wisdom,
crazy.
believe me, this is true. Now, if we get to search funds, that is not the case.
I want to know about search funds, and I know it's Agate Hound. I would need to know, like, how do you come up with the name? Is the first question, and the second
Okay.
question is, what is a search fund?
All right. Well, let me say what a search fund is first. So,
Okay.
a search fund was invented at Stanford and Harvard, and it's a terrible name because it's not a fund. And now they call it ETA, or Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition. And it is a formal class taught to MBAs. In fact, it's one of the most popular, and there's often wait lists now, but that's only happened in the last few years, whereby it teaches an MBA how to search for, acquire, and run a small business. So a $2 to $5 million EBITDA business. And it could be anything from HVAC to gutter cleaning, to arborists, to street cleaning, to dental clinics, to airplane parts, services. It's a very
That they
broad.
want to exit, that the founder might want to exit, or they can't scale it themselves?
Both, right?
Okay,
But it's
interesting.
successful. So it's already successful. The criteria is it has to have at least 3 years of consecutive years of growing EBITDA profits. And what's more likely than they can't scale it is more likely, and YPO is full of these companies actually, that it's successful and that person is taking out a couple $1,000,000 a year and they're very happy with the way things are going, but they're 65 or 70. The kids, as you know, no longer want to take over family businesses in the same way they used to. And so they're looking for an exit. And because it's on the lower market of private equity, it's a tough market. There aren't as many buyers.
What are
And so,
what are the multiples typically?
yeah, so it's generally speaking, and there's a great study to look at this. The Stanford Primer on Search Funds. If anyone's interested, it's really well done. It was invented at Stanford Harvard. Anyway, to answer your question, it's 4x EBITDA. And the magic of that is if you can grow it to where the level of private equity players, the funds, the larger funds buy it, they'll buy it for 7 to 10x EBITDA. So not only are you organically growing a company, but you're also getting a multiple expansion in there as well. And
okay,
so
hold on, because I'm listening to this and I'm not selling my company, but I'm listening through that perspective so that I can really understand it. So pretend I'm doing 2 million EBITDA and then it's 3 million next year, 4 million the year after
yeah,
that. You're saying I could sell it for 4 times EBITDA, but then what's the 7 part?
yeah. So if a searcher buys it at the 4 times, they hope to grow it to say 8 or 9 or 10 to sell it to the funds. There are just not very many PE funds at this level. It's too small for the funds, but there's a
So does
lot
the
of
owner,
PE
the original owner stays on until that happens?
No, generally no. There's a transition of 1 to 3 years, and there's an earnout associated with its continuing to work. But the MBA from Harvard, Stanford, or other schools takes over to run the company.
I
So
see.
they're
And
and
how
so
much
they're
experience do these
no,
MBAs
they don't have
typically
a
have?
ton. They don't. That's the amazing thing. And everyone always says, how could they possibly do it? And that's the magic. And the magic is it's a playbook and it's a nuanced answer, but it's because unlike venture, and I'm going to compare a lot, there's complete alignment in search funds. Remember we were talking about alignment? Here, you have not a bunch of rounds of financing. When you have a bunch of rounds of financing, the last money in is
Dilution, yeah.
right. So you don't have that. There's usually one round. Secondly, the people who are teaching the playbook at Stanford, Harvard, MIT, blah, 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 are also investing in their students. They're also coaching and mentoring. And the cap table is 10 to 12 investors who have been doing this for 20 or 30 years, who all coach and mentor, and who roll up their sleeves and are talking. And here is where we talked about the 60-year-old giving advice. They want advice because they know they haven't run something like this before. And the investors are mostly made up of people who have successfully run a company and who are now investing in this. So it's
Interesting.
like a YPO group or or like Vistage for that MBA student.
Fascinating. And so is it true that it typically is like in the 35% range of IRR?
Yeah. So the 40-year return is net 36% over
Wow.
40 years. And nobody's heard about this. And it is because this playbook, it is because of the mentoring, it is because you're buying below the radar. And it's going to continue because we have this baby boomer, what's called the silver tsunami of all these people who have to exit their companies.
I have a couple in mind, and this is what's coming to mind. It's a well-run business in that it's like, it's always been done this way. We know how it's run, but there's not a whole bunch of information that's really
Right.
transparent. It's all
Right.
like in the mind of the owner. Like I'm just thinking of some seasoned owners who might run a 30-40 million dollar business.
Right.
But
But it's a
one
shit
of their
show. It's
kids,
sausage.
but it's a shit show. And
Right.
so what type of analysis or assessment of the culture, of the systems, of the processes, and all of that, the customer
Great.
list, and goes into that
All of
before?
that goes into that. There is a whole playbook, and I keep using that word, around due diligence and quality of earnings and who you talk to and how you get the seller to be part of the transition. This is all a playbook. There's hundreds and hundreds of these deals that have been done, and they're just taking best practices. Now, to be fair, it doesn't always work, but it works more times than it doesn't. And it's not like venture where it's just an idea on the back of an envelope at a valuation that makes 0 sense.
Okay, so if
Yeah.
I'm coming in and I'm investing in the searcher, how many different companies or how many different MBAs am I getting
Yeah.
like a piece of? Like, what I'm putting in air quotes.
Yeah. No. So generally speaking, each MBA searcher, and it can be two, it can be a team of two, is going to raise their little pool of capital to pay themselves enough for up to 2 years searching to acquire. So they may pay themselves 150K, and they've got it from 10 or 12 investors. And if they don't find a company to acquire in 2 years, they're out.
And what happens to the money?
It's lost, but it's a small amount. It's a option. So I'm going to invest in searcher A, in Sally, and Sally, I put in $50,000. If Sally finds something to acquire, Sally comes back to me, because I was in the original, and says, would you like to put $1 million in this? So I've had the best interview you can imagine for 2 years, unlike venture, because I've been talking to Sally every couple weeks. Sally's smart. Sally's really does what she says. She's coachable. Like, I've learned about Sally. So not only am I now knowledgeable about the deal, I'm really knowledgeable about the entrepreneur.
But
I
this is
love that.
you, the managing director of Agate Hound. This isn't me, the investor in Agate Hound.
So this is going to get slightly confusing. So if you don't get it, tell me. Search fund's a bad name. It's not a fund. So let's call them searchers. So there are funds that invest in searchers. The best funds also teach the course. So not only, so they're seeing their best students, they're investing in some of their best students. Then they have this 2 years where they're acquiring. So they really know the student. Okay.
Yes.
So that fund invests in 25 searchers. Okay. A third of those will never acquire. So maybe they'll invest. So maybe there'll be 17 acquisitions in those 25. You still following me?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the fund says, I like 15 of those 17. I didn't really like Sally. I didn't really like that acquisition. I'm not going to do all of them. So that fund, we'll call it Fund A, has 15 acquisitions in the fund because they invested in 25 searchers from Stanford,
Yes.
Harvard, MIT. Okay. Agate Hound, we're investing in the funds that invest in the searchers.
I see. So you're like the connector to the searchers, to the funds of the searchers.
Right. We're the fund of funds, because
you're the fund of funds. Yes.
What I figured out is that the asset class has had these outsized returns. And by the way, when I say outsized, 35% compared to PE, which has been around 15%. So it's not a little bit. And if you understand the magic of compounded interest, that is a massive difference in outcome a few years out.
Yes. How long have you been doing it?
The guy who invented search funds was my professor at Stanford. He's an advisor and mentor to me now. And I've been investing for 5 years, but I started this fund just recently. And I love it. In the last couple weeks, I've been to the Stanford Search Fund Conference. This Saturday, I was at the Harvard Search Fund Conference. And tomorrow at 6 a.m., I'm going to the Chicago booth Northwestern Search Fund Conference. And what's amazing is 11 years ago, 2 schools taught search, Stanford and Harvard. And now 25 business schools in America teach search. And now these search fund conferences, Harvard had 1,000 people and there was a wait list, sold out. Stanford, 600, sold out. I mean, it's a thing and it's having a moment, and you are going to hear a lot about it. And it's so fun.
I'm not surprised that you're right at the forefront of it. And I'm guessing there are competitors.
Well, there's more money coming in. There's more funds. There's no other fund of funds that I'm aware
That's what
of.
I'm guessing. Are there other fund of funds?
Not yet. And because
And
we're a small fund, it's nobody would really want to do this. It's perfect for me where I am in my life, but it's not. We're not going to get a bunch of fees. I'm only going to do well if the asset class does well. But I'm supremely confident in that, and I'm backing it up. I think I'll be the largest investor in my own fund. But because it's done it for 40 years, and because the
Mhm.
playbook is so good. And what I love about it, one other point, is no faster way to be a CEO than buy a company. And guess what? For people who are underrepresented, women, people of color, no glass ceiling.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds, you're giving me chills just hearing about it. It's so exciting and so cool. Is there anything else that you can tell us about this asset class? Because, most of, maybe people listening have heard of it, but why is it such an unknown asset class? And what can
Honestly,
like
you
others that are listening do to kind of learn more?
great questions. So it's been unknown because the people who have been investing in it, I don't think they would say it this way, but the truth is, it was an insider's game. It felt like Sand Hill Road 40 years ago, when literally that, if you wanted to do venture,
Yeah,
you
you can't
literally
get in on these deals. Yeah.
can't get in because you're not in the club. And
Yeah.
now more and
Interesting.
more funds are being formed. So the asset class is maturing to the point where a fund of funds makes sense. And if you want to find out more about it, uh, feel free to go to agathound.fund. I have a resource page, or Google or Bing. We're in Seattle, I'll
Mhm.
say Bing, uh, search funds, or ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition. Stanford's got several papers on it. You're going to hear more about it. And for people, by the way, I'm investing in the traditional search fund model, which is MBA straight out of business school. But there's a bunch of various, there's incubators and accelerators. I have a friend who is mid-career who's thinking about going to do this and acquiring a company. It's really cool.
I
Can
think
you tell I'm
it's,
excited?
well, I can tell, and you're making me excited. Tell me a little bit more about Hand of God Wines. I love your wine. Is that just a passion thing, or is that like a business that you're like spending a ton of time on?
It's 17 years that
I
I've
know,
been 17.
17.8 years, almost 18.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. So, it was one of those moments where, what happened, I turned left at Albuquerque. I just went down to Argentina and fell in love with the beauty of this place. I had a moment, honestly, had a moment where I walked onto what became my vineyard and I felt something. I don't know if you've ever had that moment in life. I've had it a couple times. And it was like, I need to buy this land and I need to do something on this land. And I am from Nebraska, so the farming aspect of it uh, resonated with me. And my partner Santiago is an amazing winemaker, and it was a checkbox item I always wanted to do. And I don't know where it goes from here. It's a really brutally hard business. And
Yes.
I actually like to compare the wine business. If you do business school, if you go to business school, they talk about business case models, business right models. And wine may be the worst business model I've ever encountered in my life.
Yeah, you're like, let's not do that.
No, seriously. Like, people say to me all the time, I really want to get in the wine business. And I think to myself, go buy a company, do a search, make a lot of money, and drink great wine. Because search is the single best business model I've ever seen. So hopefully I've learned something over here. I've got a lot of great wine. I have a really great community. As you know, I put on 1,000 dinners with my wine.
Yeah. Are you still doing those, or did they like
I
fall off
do. No, I've
completely?
done Salt Lake City, San Diego, San Francisco, and Seattle in the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, I'm super into it. So you are one of the busiest people that I know. I always see you at things, and then you're like, I came from this event and I'm going to this event, and I don't even know how many you hit a night. What is your, like, where does that juice come from for you? And how do you balance it? Like, when you're not at these events, what are you doing at home? Are you chilling?
I meditate every day. I have to. I'm a total addict to Headspace and Andy. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
I do know exactly, but I do Calm, and I do
Yeah, Calm's
what's her
good.
name? I can't remember her name, but I like her voice. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. But
Headspace. How long do you meditate?
20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Wow.
But it's amazing. It really is amazing. It's changed my life. And I used to laugh. Believe it or not, my sister, to her credit, took me to a transcendental meditation when I was 11 years old, and I have my mantra, and I'm not going to tell you. And they used to say if we could just get 1% of the Earth population meditating, it would be a much better place. And I used to scoff at that, and I now really believe that.
I 100% agree with you. Are there other rituals or daily habits that you do or live by that you can share? Because we all want to be a little bit more like you.
That
You
that
do
is
so
probably
much.
not true, Shauna. That's funny you say that.
Well,
Look, I wake
I'm
up
just checking
every
for me.
day. I wake up every day and I say a prayer. I do. And I check in with my gratitude and I set intentions. And then I have a really big cup of coffee.
I love that. In that order, my coffee would come first. But yeah, I love that. That's a good morning.
I'm a total biohacker, and I hear about these people who are doing their 10 minutes of sunshine in the eye and then little salt water and then the cold shower. I'm like, no.
Cold plunge. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm not into that.
I would be doing all of it if I could. I'm like, I start and then I lose interest. My only consistent thing is I'm really trying to do the meditation, very challenging. So that's incredible. And then of course, coffee, that's just like a need.
You know what's a fun thing to do on the meditation, just really quick? For several years, I had a friend and we would meditate every day together on the phone. It's really a nice thing to do. And it kept us accountable.
So just call and then just.
Yeah. We set a time and just put it on. Yeah.
Oh my God, I would start laughing and I would start talking. I would ruin. You and I would not be able to do that.
Okay,
We would
that's
just be
not.
talking. I'm not your right accountability partner.
I love that. Well,
okay,
hey,
yeah.
Can I just say, laughing is the best.
Oh,
and it's so fun. It's so fun that you and I, we don't talk nearly enough that we can sit here and do this and laugh as much as I'm just loving that we're just laughing with each other.
So yeah. Laughing is good medicine. We need more of it, more meditation, more laughter. Okay. My final question for you, because I'm gonna let you go because you're going on probably 20 different things tonight, is what fuels you?
This fuels me. Really. I'm not just saying that. I was thinking about this all day. I was so excited to be able to spend time with you.
You're so sweet.
No,
so nice.
it's I'm not playing to the audience or the host here. I learn something every time I have interactions. Hopefully I brought some smiles to you. You brought smiles to me. I learn something every time. I'm just one of those. I think it might be my genetics. I truly am a person who's grateful for almost everything. The good, the bad, and I honestly believe stuff happens and I get the choice on how to react and how to learn from it.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.